On Capitol Hill, Senate Republicans continue their internal fight over the health care bill as polls show strong disapproval of the Republican plan. And polling in the past week indicates historically low approval for the president at this point in his first term. Multiple polls have Mr. Trump's approval in the 30s or at 40 and his disapproval rating in the 50s. For all that, it's time for Politics Monday with Tamara Keith of NPR and Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report. So it's time to talk about polls again. We don't do this every week. We save it for special occasions. But Amy, seriously, there are a group of new polls, 3 or 4 polls out taken in the last week or so that do show some slippage for the president in the last few months, particularly among independents. There's a Washington Post poll that shows, a 6-point slippage just since April.
Right, just among
independents.
Just among independents.
Right.
Look, when we first started talking about the president right after his inauguration, we said, you know, this is a president who is starting with the lowest approval rating of any president that's been inaugurated. Let's see where he goes with this. You know, instead of starting with a deep reservoir of goodwill and a honeymoon, which most presidents start with, he started with a deep ditch, right? He didn't have that reservoir of goodwill. Was he going to be able to fill up that well? And the reality is, here we are 6 months later, he's actually 14 points lower than what he was. So he's not filling it up. He's draining it even more. And where it's draining from is from independents. And that's a danger point here, not just for the president, but really for members of Congress who are up in 2018. If you're a Republican, you know your base is still behind you. Democrats have never been with you. But independents, those are the folks, especially for members who sit in sort of swing-type districts, those are the people that they can't afford to be losing by this percentage that the president's losing by. If he only has a 31% approval rating among independents, it makes it very difficult for Republicans up in 2018.
So, Tam, we know the Trump folks already have their campaign committee up and running for re-election. How do they look at all this?
It's not clear what the campaign is actually doing in terms of moving toward re-election. He's held some rallies. President Trump tweeted over the weekend that he thought it wasn't really that bad, you know, that this poll was not so bad. And you know, the best thing the president could do to improve his approval rating, I guess there's probably 2 things. One, maybe focus on some of the people who didn't support him in the beginning and maybe try doing anything that would not be seen as strictly partisan. And the other thing would be, you know, like, start winning. He has, you know, he promised you're going to be so sick of winning. Yeah. But he hasn't had the major legislative accomplishments. The health care bill has gotten totally bogged down. It was supposed to be done maybe by April. And that's something that his base really wanted. But he just has not done a lot of things. He did the executive orders that the base liked, but that turned off the independents and others.
And we even, you and I we were just talking a moment ago, Amy, about when you ask people even about impeachment, 41% in the Monmouth poll support impeaching the president. And you were just saying for Richard Nixon at this point, it was much less than that.
For Richard Nixon, going into the summer of 1973, his overall approval rating was basically where Donald Trump's is right now. The difference is the intensity of the opposition or the dislike of President Nixon among partisans. He had 25% approval rating among Democrats. Nixon did in July of 1973. President Trump has about 8% of approval rating among Democrats. So the intensity of opposition to the president has always been an issue. As Tam points out, he's not getting the intensities of support among his base. And he made that decision when he came into office. Instead of trying to grow that base, right. He had a very narrow base of support, very narrow support among all kinds of voters, except for Republicans. Instead of trying to grow it, he's focused and doubled down on the smaller group of people who've supported him all along.
So, Tam, you're talking about ways where the president could put some wins on the board. Health care reform is one of the issues he has been focused on. This was another question in the Washington Post ABC poll, and this can't be considered good news for the administration. People were asked what they think about Obamacare versus the Republican plan by 2 to 1. they prefer Obamacare.
Which is pretty remarkable. Obamacare has seen it's having better days than it ever had when President Obama was president. I was out in Kentucky last week talking to voters. Just a few little anecdotes. One woman I talked to supported President Trump, doesn't like Obamacare, but is deeply concerned about the Republican health care bill, in particular the Medicaid cuts. Another voter I talked to has basically said, what's the rush? Why are they hurrying? Why don't they slow down and do this together? He was also a Republican. And then one other Republican I talked to said he didn't really know what was in the bill, but he was glad it got rid of the individual mandate. So
that's the big problem right now. Yeah. There's nobody selling this bill.
Right.
We're talking a lot about process. We're talking a lot about members who are supporting or not supporting it. There's nobody out there really championing this bill. Even the president himself is just sending out tweets saying, I sure hope you guys vote for it. We've been saying we're going to vote for it. He's not going out. He's not holding rallies. I looked at the amount of money that's been spent since the end of May on ads that talk about this health care bill. $6 million have been spent so far in advertising. $5.8 million of those dollars have been spent on negative attacks on the health care bill or urging senators to vote against it. So without a champion, it's not surprising to me at all that the health care bill that Republicans are putting forward isn't particularly popular.
Probably similar to the ratio of what was spent against Obamacare when that was being debated. Right. But Tam, this is, with the vote now delayed, the opponents are worried. The folks who don't want this are saying it gives them time to build up more opposition.
Mitch McConnell did not want to take a lot of time to let this bill stew. He wanted to hurry up and get a vote on it, and there's a reason for that, because the longer it just hangs out there, the longer people have to look at the Congressional Budget Office score, which isn't out just yet, but the longer governors have to put pressure on their senators, the longer voters have to call into their Senate offices every single day, the harder it gets to make this happen.
It's always easier to fight something than it is to support it. But having said this, Amy, your point about so much of this has been done behind closed doors.
That's right. Well, and without a real champion supporting it. But you're right, this has not been done with committee votes. There hasn't been a whole lot of public discussion, or even within Congress, a whole lot of public debate about this. Tam is right. McConnell wanted to get this done, move on to something like taxes.
I promise we won't talk about polls again for a whole year.
No.
Fingers crossed.
I don't believe that.
Tam and Amy, thank you.
You're welcome.